And thank you for registering for the Creative Manifesto Assembly. This opening assembly session is really just to give a bit more information about the project, but also go over the working groups, because we've got some really exciting external speakers and organizations coming in, and each of you would have signed up to a working group at this moment. But just for me to also reiterate that if, say, you're attending a working group on the 17th and you're available for the 24th is the other date for the working groups, then you feel free to be able to attend that one as well, because like I'm saying, we've got some really interesting speakers, and if you're able to attend, that'll be great. So the Creative Manifesto, let me see if I can click it here. The assembly itself is an opportunity to explore and discuss different aspects of arts and culture in London and the future of arts and culture in the creative sectors in London. And really the project came about from conversations with students, staff, sabbatical officers of the Arts Students Union to talk about, in the lead up to the London mayoral election, how often arts and culture, despite being the second biggest industry in London and the UK, the nuances and the different challenges that the sector faces is not really explored in much depth, despite the size of the industry. And especially for young creatives, I know when I graduated in 2016 from studying art, fine art, that I wasn't really prepared for all the different kind of challenges that I was going to be facing, or I wasn't able to engage in a conversation around my life as an artist outside of university and after university. So really it came about from those discussions and trying to provide a space and a platform for students and staff to explore some of those concerns, but also talk about not just the concerns and challenges, but what are the alternatives. And as I'll go on to discuss in a minute, that the issues and the concerns that have already existed, that have prevailed within the creative sectors and arts and culture in London, have only deepened because of the pandemic. But we're trying to say through this project that whilst, yes, this is concerning and there are issues out there, it's also a time in which to reflect and look forward at the same time to consider what are the alternatives for the future, and placing yourselves as students and staff who are coming at from entering the creative sectors at different angles, at different points in their life, but really taking your experiences and your knowledge and valuing that and saying that your voice is important within this, and trying to empower you through this kind of process of the assembly and the project onwards. So the assembly itself is a space to consider the alternatives to some of the concerns and challenges different creatives are currently facing. Why is it important then? So the COVID-19 pandemic, as I've said, has served to deepen prevailing issues across arts and culture in London. And now, more than ever, is a time to look to the future with big ideas for how things can be made better. It's also a matter that just with the assembly itself, rarely the creatives from different practices and backgrounds get to come together to explore the different challenges affecting them within their sector. And we realized that UAL is a massive institution, and we don't really get the opportunity for the different colleges and different students from different practices and staff to come together in that kind of space and facilitate that. And we had actually originally intention to run the assembly last academic year, but because of the pandemic, it got put on hold. And we were thinking that it was going to be a bit of a logistical nightmare basically to run, because trying to facilitate cross-college collaboration and projects, it's very difficult when you center activity within a specific college. So say it might be at CSM, but students at LCC, LCF, wherever, might not be able to attend that day or in that specific space. But now, because of the pandemic, being able to run things online allows us to facilitate that a lot easier. So it's actually an opportunity. And it's one of the things, again, that we're trying to think about with this, with the assembly. And hopefully when you go into your working groups on the 17th and the 24th, you'll be discussing some of these things about what COVID-19 has raised, some of the issues, but also some of the potentials and ways to move forward, especially with virtual learning and teaching, but also how you might be working more virtually and from home as creatives in the future. So one thing to be open about is that there's been a slight change of direction for the outcome of the Creative Manifesto itself. We'd always originally intended for the Assembly to facilitate not only this discussion, but the production of a set of demands, which would go into the creation of a manifesto itself. That has changed slightly, largely due to the reason of my own departure, which will be happening in the end of February. Now, that's not to say, just to reassure people, that the project stops dead there, but I've been working with my colleagues and partners that are involved in this project to consider how we continue this work and this conversation. And we'll be doing that through different workshops, keeping in touch with you guys, linking up with different departments around UAL to kind of continue the conversations that started from this assembly. And really the assembly itself has always been about that. It's about bringing students and staff together to be talking about these issues and sharing ideas. So in that way, the assembly in itself, in the structure, is completely the same. The working groups are going ahead. There's no need to worry about that. But we're just kind of still developing a little bit ideas for ways to take the project forward. And I will take questions at the end from anyone, from people, if they want to send it to me now, or I can email them about what we'll be doing moving forward to make sure that it progresses. So we won't, in terms of when it comes to your working groups, we'll still hold the talks, we'll still hold the workshops themselves, but we won't be asking you to create a set of demands. What we will be doing is looking at the concerns and challenges within your separate themes. So whether that's around accessibility in arts and culture, decolonizing the arts, working and living in London as a creative, we'll be asking you to kind of look at the concerns and challenges and discuss this. And then also looking at kind of what are the alternatives and having that discussion. And we'll be running kind of interactive activities in your working groups that will help facilitate that. And hopefully it'll be really interesting discussion anyway, because like I said, we as creatives, we don't really get that opportunity in that space to come together across different practices, and in UAL's case, across different colleges, to be facilitating that. So there still is a life after the manifesto, but unfortunately it's not going to be in the original conception as it was, but we are considering how next academic year, the following year, just to think about how we might be able to actually use the resources and the talks that are created within this assembly to maybe produce a manifesto either in the summer or next academic year. So that is still a possibility itself. I'll get people, if anyone has any questions about that, then they can pop it in the chat or the Q&A function at the end of this chat, and I'll try to answer them. But if not, you can just email me. I'm sure you do have my email. I'll send it out again or put it at I think I might have it at the end of this presentation, just if you have any queries about that. But just to reiterate, the assembly is staying exactly the same, still got the great talks that are going on, which I'll get onto in a minute. And still the interactive activities and facilitating those discussions that are happening. So I just wanted to get into now talking about the working groups and some of the great speakers that we've got involved. Like I said at the start, I know a lot of people have committed to joining specific working groups, and that's fine, but I wanted to go over kind of who will be speaking and what they're going to be speaking about, and also the fact that if you're attending, say, on the 17th and you're free on the 24th, I believe it is, or I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong, the 24th or the 23rd of February, then you can also attend that working group itself. So the assembly is going to be split into these 5 particular themes around arts and culture in London. So we'll be looking at sustainability, accessibility, which will be speaking kind of exclusively about support for disabled creatives and ableism within the creative sectors, decolonizing the arts, cross-sector collaboration, and the cost of living, or working and living in London as a creative. So the sustainability working group, we've got a great architectural firm called Fielding Clegg Bradley Studios, who will be delivering a talk during that working group to be looking at kind of specifically how them as an architectural firm have been working a lot around ways in which to tackle the climate crisis, and within the architecture kind of sector, working with other architectural firms to make sure that their practice is more sustainable. It's a architectural and urban design practice with an international reputation for design quality, for pioneering environmental expertise, and a progressive architectural approach. The practice was actually founded in 1978 with a specific ambition to produce environmentally and socially responsive design. This ethos has flourished and developed, and FCBS continues to have a holistic approach at the forefront of low energy design, working with heritage and existing environments. One Planet Living, which they'll get onto in the talk, which is a really interesting concept. And they actually set up the Declare Climate Emergency agenda. Through the knowledge and the performance of the buildings they have designed, they provide solutions to support the imperative transition to a zero carbon economy. So they'll be exploring and talking about all their practice and architecture within London more generally. And we'll have multiple speakers from FCBS, which are all experts in their own field. So that's a really interesting talk to go to. And it's got some really good sign up from people that have been registering for the assembly. The other working group will be for accessibility, and we'll be looking at kind of the challenges faced by disabled creatives, ableism within the arts, and looking at disabled creative communities. So that will be a talk with Shape Arts, who are a disability-led arts organisation which works to improve access to culture for disabled people by providing opportunities for disabled artists, training cultural institutions to be more open to disabled people, and through running participatory arts and development programs. We work quite closely with them at the Arts SU and have a really good working relationship with them. And it's really interesting just to hear about the organisation itself. And we'll have a representative speaking from there. But we'll also have two artists that are represented by Shape Arts. One who you can see at the top there, which will be Abigail Palmer, who is a London-based interactive artist and writer exploring the relationship between linguistic and physical communication. Experiments including poetry, immersive art, and sensory intervention have led to a number of one-to-one performances and installations. Abby's experience of disability has a direct impact on her work itself. And then the second artist that will be part of that talk at the bottom right there is Christopher Samuel, who's a really exciting multidisciplinary artist whose practice is rooted in identity, disability politics, often echoing the many facets of his own lived experience. Seeking to integrate his personal understanding of identity as a disabled person impacted by inequality and marginalization, Christopher responds with urgency, humor, and poetic subversiveness within his work. This approach makes his work accessible to a wider audience, allowing others to identify and relate to a wider spectrum of human experience. So some great speakers there, and it's going to be a really interesting discussion. And I do like, for all these working groups, while some people might identify with some of the areas, such as for decolonizing the arts, if you're a person from an ethnic minority or a person of color, obviously that might apply to you, but also encourage white participants to attend, because decolonizing is something we all need to work towards. And similarly with accessibility, you don't need to identify as disabled to find this a really interesting talk itself, but also in order to tackle ableism within the creative sectors, everyone needs to be making an effort with that. And we'll be discussing that and exploring that in depth in the talk. So it should be really interesting. Moving on to the Decolonizing the Arts working group. So we are going to be looking at what does it mean to decolonize the arts, and what does that term decolonize mean, rather than using it, because it is often thrown about as this kind of buzzword that everyone uses, but doesn't really break down. So we want to kind of break that down, but also look at the context of what does it mean to decolonize the arts itself, not only within creative higher education, but outside of that, the creative sectors. Also looking at addressing structural racism, obviously, within the arts, white Eurocentric forms of knowledge, and valuing diverse cultural forms of knowledge, and also representation within arts and culture. We've got a great speaker for that working group, who is Belonle Tajuddin, and they are an emerging curator and artist advisor, and has spent a majority of her career promoting artists from underrepresented groups in the art world. At university, she launched Black Blossoms, a platform designed to increase the visibility of Black women and non-binary in the art world. She co-curated a touring exhibition and successfully introduced new audiences to Black visual artists. Black Blossoms has been featured in the BBC, Galdem, and Virgin since 2015. Most recently, she works on a freelance project with the Tate and devised and teaches Art in the Age of Black Girl Magic, a course that has been featured in Vogue as a great Black History Month event to attend. And Belonle actually is a part-time tutor, I think I'm getting that right, at UAL. So there'll be really interesting discussions from her insights as a former student. She was actually used to be a sabbatical officer at the Art Students Union, but also just the work that she's done after that. And she's a really inspirational figure. So if you're available for that, or you have signed up, that'll be really great. The next working group will be cross-sector collaboration, which has got some really good sign up from people. I'm sure probably maybe because of the name as well of getting involved. UAL Art on the UAL, TFL Art on the Underground. And within cross-sector collaboration, we'll be looking at how creative sectors work with other sectors across London, basically. So we'll be looking at the value of collaboration, alternative ways of working as creatives, learning from different sectors, and how the arts can integrate with the likes of transport, hospitality, public services, education. So we will be, the talk will be facilitated by Eleanor Pinfield, who's the head of TFL Art on the Underground. For those that don't know about Art on the Underground, you probably definitely encountered some of the work on underground stations across London, but it's a pioneer in commissioning contemporary artworks that enrich the journeys of millions on the tube every day. From large-scale commissions at Gloucester Road Station to the Pocket Tube Map cover commissions, Art on the Underground has gathered a roll call of the best artists over 15 years, maintaining art as a central element of transport for London's identity and engaging passengers and staff in a sense of shared ownership. It's a really interesting kind of organisation. I know we'll be looking specifically at how creative sectors work with the transport sector and travel, but there's really interesting conversations to come out of that around public art, the value of public art, looking at how the process of commissioning work from that organisation, but also looking at themes around gentrification, for example, some things, you know, looking at these kind of controversial themes and how artists can often feed into that and how do we fight back against it. So there's going to be a really interesting discussion from that, and especially within the working group itself, just to engage with students and staff around cross-sector collaboration more generally and what it means as a creative and different ways of working. So that should be great. And then the final working group will be working and living in London as a creative, which I think is going to be a really interesting working group, because I feel for students especially, whilst you're studying, you don't really get to have those conversations or get prepared for kind of all the experiences of graduating, trying to find work, valuing your work as a creative as well, trying to sell yourself, and obviously operating within a competitive jobs market and the impact of the pandemic on arts and culture, which is a very timely kind of conversation to be having. And we've got two really great speakers in for that. The first is Anna Kudryarado, who is a journalist, broadcaster, and campaigner. She runs Lance, a change-making newsletter that champions and supports freelancers and co-hosts a chart-topping podcast about the future of work. Is This Working? Her first book, You're the Business, is a guide to self-employment and is out in March. Her writing appears in the New York Times, The Guardian, BBC, Wired, The Paris Review, New York Magazine, Monocle, and many others. She writes about business, culture, technology, with a particular focus on working life. And she'll be in conversation with Matt Dowling, who's featured on the bottom left there. Matt's an entrepreneur, campaigner, speaker, activist, and writer and consultant who has been featured on radio, podcasts, and national press discussing a range of entrepreneurial topics, fighting for the rights of the self-employed and addressing issues faced by freelancers. He's the founder of the Freelancer Club, which some of you might have heard of before, which is an online creative community providing freelancers with essential resources to help them develop their business and value their talent whilst facilitating connections between companies and freelancers. Anna's and Matt's work really like kind of crosses over, and they've actually worked on quite a few campaigns. Most recently, Matt's been leading, lobbying the government around the furlough scheme and trying to ensure that freelancers are kind of brought into that discussion and protected within it. So it's a really interesting kind of pioneering area that they're looking at. And I know myself, when I graduated from studying fine art, doing freelance work, I was not prepared for it one bit, and I didn't really get to have those conversations during university. So I feel like this is a great opportunity to be not only exploring some of the concerns and challenges, but what's great about freelancing, for example, but also ways in which to make sure that your work is valued, how to set a fee, all these different things. So I'm sure for a lot of students, and students especially, it will be a really informative process, but also, you know, looking at kind of a critique of the gig economy, of unstable work, often having to work in multiple jobs, and just looking at how to kind of navigate that a little bit. And the discussion in the workshop after should be really interesting. So yeah, if anyone is available for that and has signed up to, say, a working group on the 24th, because this is on the 17th, then please do sign up, or just send me an email and I'll make sure that you're registered on both working groups. So that is basically it, a roundup for the assembly itself. I did just want to kind of reiterate, just to make clear to all students and staff, but especially students, that the London mayoral elections, it got postponed last year because of the pandemic, but will be going ahead this year, with the vote happening on Thursday, the 6th of May. And registration to vote, the deadline is Monday, the 19th of April. I just reiterate this point because, like I was saying, the original intentions of the manifesto had always been around trying to kind of create a debate, not only within the institution, but outwardly, to talk about the support that is needed for creatives. And there's still the potential to do that with the manifesto in the different form that it's taken, and ways in which to lobby the incoming London mayor, whoever that might be, because they set different strategies after they're elected, which they usually publish around December time. And one of those strategies will be around culture. So what they have planned for the next 4 years whilst they're London mayor. And that is a good opportunity and provides quite a long time frame to not only continue the discussions that start from the assembly, but find ways in which to actually push those discussions out, and what we've kind of explored around alternatives to the concerns and challenges in these 5 different areas, push that out to local government, lobby them to try and kind of raise an awareness of that. And like we're saying, this is all a practice, not only with having an open conversation, but really valuing students and staff voices. So yeah, there's a lot of exciting opportunities to come from it. If anyone has any questions, pop it into the Q&A chat, because I've seen that I've just got one from Nibras, who asks, how do you join the working group? So the working groups, you've already signed up. You would have already signed up to one in particular. You could have signed up to multiple, granted that it wasn't on the same day, because we've got 3 working groups happening on the 17th and 3 happening and 2 happening on the 24th. But if you're available to go to one on the alternate date, email me and I'll just put your name down and I'll send you the Zoom link to make sure that you can go to both if you're interested. I've got another question. Question related to the longevity, continuity of the groups and ideas. So the working groups themselves, we've structured it so that it's one long day. I know for a few attendees or people registering, that might look like quite a long time. We are providing a break in between the talk and the actual workshops itself, so that people can go away. The reason that we structured it like that is just because of the academic year, the amount of working groups that we're holding, and to try and make sure that we sustain engagement with the working groups itself. If we were to split it up into the talks on one day and then the workshops on another, it will be a lot of different dates that we have to organize, and there might be quite a bit of a fallout from people attending the talks and just the workshops. I know some people might have actually signed up and said that they just want to attend the talk presentation but don't want to engage in the workshop, which is absolutely fine. Another question here. The continuity after I leave. So the project is going to continue in the sense that, as I was saying at the start, we won't be producing a set of demands from the assembly itself, but what we will be doing is, from the discussions that we've begun within the assembly, we're going to be looking. It's still kind of it's a work in progress at this moment in time, but we're essentially going to be looking for ways in which to continue those conversations with different departments at UAL, and providing kind of spaces in which to connect those that have engaged in the assembly and also students and staff in general, to be kind of just discussing these points a bit further. I can't give like an exact kind of structure and answer as of yet, but I will keep you updated. And like I said, I will be leaving at the end of February, right at the end. So we'll still be kind of, just developing that, but I'm going to keep everyone updated. And like I said, I know it is maybe a bit disappointing that we won't, as it stands, be creating the manifesto as it had been originally thought out, but we are still definitely going to be carrying it forward in another form and continuing those conversations, whether that's as a matter of continuing workshops to kind of develop ideas for alternatives to concerns and challenges around those different themes, or looking at ways to develop our relationship with the kind of external speakers that we've got in. All of those are kind of open to possibility, but the project is not going to stop dead. I'll just reassure everyone now. This is really a platform to kind of begin those conversations and continue them into the future. Yeah, so I hope that kind of answers your question. Are there any other questions that anyone has? Nope. Okay, well, thank you for attending today. And like I said, you should all have now the Zoom links for your working groups that you set up. Like I said at the end of this presentation, if you're available and you want to attend another working group as well as the one that you're currently attending, just email me and I'll make a note and make sure that I can send over all the login details. But if you have any other questions that you think of after this, just email me. You should all have my email because I've definitely emailed all the participants. And I'll make sure to kind of answer you guys as soon as I can. But yeah, thank you for registering and thank you for coming today. Like I said, it was just to give you a bit more information and also just give you an update about the future of the project. It's going to be really exciting over the next 2 weeks with the talks and just seeing kind of what comes out of that in the workshops with you guys, those that are attending the workshops, without beginning those conversations. But yeah, it will be great to see kind of where this project goes and the talks as well will just be great. So thank you for attending, and I'll speak to you all soon and see you all soon probably as well.